Hello, everybody. Welcome to Bolivia Political Crossroads. Good morning, Ernesto.
Good morning, Paul. How are you doing?
Doing great, doing great. Glad to be here with you and with everybody else.
Thank you. Fantastic.
Today is Saturday, September 12th, 2020. This would be episode number 33. And we're a third of the way to 100. Well, it's been more or less interesting week, I guess you could say, with the campaigns. The political campaigns have officially kicked off since I think it was last Sunday officially, right? Am I correct in that?
Yeah.
So we've got to see a week of that so far. My initial observations of that are, it's a bit odd because people are weary with the social distancing and all the measures you have to take and the curfews, so you can't go out at night and etc. There have been observations that people are too crowded together, not wearing masks. I'm not surprised, and I think that's to be expected. It is what it is, and I'm not so sure any of those behaviors are going to change between now and October. Besides that, I guess you could say Carlos Mesa is kind of off to a clumsy start. For those of you that follow the news here, I guess Ernesto might agree with me on this, that Jeanine Añez, part of her strategy so far in her campaign is kind of to attack the MAS and Carlos Mesa, Comunidad Ciudadana. And she basically made an accusation, and this is kind of stuck on Carlos Mesa. Before, if Carlos Mesa was known among those that don't like him as the quitter, because he quit the presidency and it's his fault that Evo Morales was able to become president. And now I think the label or the pejorative that they're trying to make stick to him is that he's a coward, because during this whole pandemia, he didn't come out of his house, he stayed home. He hasn't done anything to help anything. And when the MAS was doing the bloqueos again and, raising a ruckus, he was nowhere to be seen. He just likes to sit home and send videos on Instagram and on Facebook and Twitter and so he gets attacked for that. Mesa responded to basically an accusation by Añez that he hasn't done anything to put up a fight against the MAS lately. Is that well, he released, he was quoted as saying on a radio program, and I'll translate this to English as best I can, that the one, in quotes, the one who stopped the MAS party is named Carlos Mesa in Comunidad Ciudadana through the popular vote, which believed in and considered me as the adequate or appropriate candidate, obligating Evo Morales to do two things. One, to commit a great electoral fraud, and two, because of the popular pressure, the protests, thanks to us having stopped him in the vote in the voting booth, to flee the country. And so now he's getting attacked for that. People are saying, "Oh, Carlos Mesa thinks he's the savior, and that how can he say he's the one who stopped Evo? That it was Camacho and and that's just his ego." And my person, I told you this before we went on the air, Ernesto. I think he was a bit clumsy in the quick. He didn't choose his words perhaps as carefully as he should have. And something that kind of calls my attention. I don't know if he's done this before, and this is something that a lot of the populist candidate or politicians have in common, that is very off-putting for me, is that he referred to himself in third person, which to me is a sign of egocentrism. But I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into that, or maybe that's just the way he's speaking in that particular moment. But it did call my attention because I haven't seen him do that before. So I'll leave it there, but it certainly doesn't put him off to a good start. New news comes out every day and things happen daily, and so people will probably forget quickly, but an unfortunate start for him.
Okay, I really I watched how the fight between Mesa and Jeanine got through this week, but I hadn't put too much attention in what you just read. Very interesting, I find it, because when you think about it, he's correct. Uh, if it wouldn't have been for the amount of votes that he got in the election, there would have been no room for Camacho doing whatever he did, right? It was a
I agree
prerequisite
with you.
in order to,
I completely agree with you.
I think that's mhm.
Go ahead. No,
That's a good point there for him. Yeah, that's a good point for Mesa. The thing is that people, one, I don't think people see things as this, because you have to be more politicized in order to see this, that there was a vote and that vote provoked whatever happened with the Pititas and whatever happened with Camacho. That's a consequence of something,
right.
And
I think you would argue
the
that
vigor of Camacho.
if Mesa hadn't been in the race, there's no other candidate that would even have come close. I can't say with 100% certainty, but everything points to, look at Oscar Ortiz. Nobody would have come close. Nobody else had a chance. And that's what they needed, was somebody to be, on Abel's heels. And that person was Carlos Mesa. So sorry, go ahead.
So in that sense, I think Carlos Mesa is correct in what he just said. It's true, more than correct. It's true. He gave way to the protest later on. If he wouldn't have been that close to Evo Morales, the protest wouldn't have had roots. The reason there were roots is because he was very strong in the votes. So I think that what he did, and I agree with you in that the choice of words or the choice of focus was not the best, because in a way he was comparing himself with Camacho in the end, because that's how the newspapers portrayed this whole idea. It's not Camacho, it's me, the one who stopped. And I think that's the wrong focusing to this whole thing, because it's not one or the other, and I think that's a bad choice of words from Carlos Mesa, because the way he puts things is it's not him, it's me who stopped him. Because the question is who stopped Carlos, who stopped Evo Morales? Oh, he's implying that it's not him, it's me. Right.
I didn't finish the quote. Sorry, there's more to it. Sorry to cut you, but you're making an excellent point, and it also applies to him comparing himself to Añez, because what he said, a few words later, was that he said to Añez, you recently showed up 2 days after Evo had left the country. Where were you? And so it's a pissing contest, And so he's comparing himself to Camacho and to Añez, and that's not. Right. I agree. That's not correct. Everybody, whether it was Camacho, whether it was Mesa, whether it was Añez, whether it was Pumardi, played a particular role in the chain of events that resulted in Evo having to step down and leave the country.
Right. But what you mentioned at the beginning, I think is correct. He chose the wrong spin on this whole thing. Because he's comparing himself with the other guys. I think it would have been better if he just said, the vote I got paved the way to the others that followed, which did a good job. But if it wouldn't have been for the vote I had, nothing could have happened after that. It's the spin of it. And I think that Carlos Mesa should be a master in spin, but apparently he's not a spin master every time he speaks. I think that he in this particular issue, he didn't focus it right. I think the spin was wrong, and that really counts against him, because everybody gave him hell throughout the week. That was terrible, because he couldn't respond to the hell. To people, really, the hero here is not Carlos Mesa. It's Camacho. I think that throughout the country, people would say that. Not only in Santa Cruz. The hero, the guy that went to the Alto, despite the fact that there were thousands of people outside of the airport and risked his life, was not Carlos Mesa. That was definitely Camacho. But
Mhm.
people can distinguish the difference. See, people are not idiots. They know the difference. They know that Camacho is very macho. And his last name is recognition of
Like I
his
said, Macho
behavior. He's
Camacho.
macho Camacho, right? But they know he wouldn't be a good president, so they don't vote for him. He's just macho Camacho. And whereas with Carlos Mesa, it's different. They see him as he's maybe not a hero, but vote-wise, he's very important. And I think that things are very differentiated. For people, I think they're clearly differentiated. Carlos Mesa made a mistake in the way he presented things, the facts, I think. And he's paying for it, yeah. I don't know how much that's going to hurt him, though. I
Yeah,
think
it's
it's
it's still
more
early. It's very early. I agree with you there. But it's an unfortunate way to start off here.
But believe me, I think Carlos Mesa has a good lifesaver throughout this week.
Which is?
This is very important. I have a close friend that lives in El Alto,
Mhm.
and I speak with him frequently. He's my friend. He's a lawyer. We do things together, and I talk politics with him. And he gives me the gist of what's happening in El Alto. And I was very curious about that because I have a friend in Santa Cruz that was an active politician years ago. And he was telling me that really in El Alto, the march of the Masistas was something that really got him very emotional. And he thought that this was a very important thing that happened in El Alto. My friend from El Alto told me that's not true. He said, El Alto is divided. There's no such thing as an overwhelming presence of the Mas in El Alto. And yes, there was a march, but it was by no means overwhelming. There are people here from the alcaldesa. There are people here from different political currents. It's not like before, he said. That's number one. And he ended his conversation saying, but you know what's very curious? He said, what? I said, in all the radio stations and in all the TV stations in La Paz, Ramses appears.
What's that?
Ramses, this guy whose last name is Ramses, or not, it's a nickname. Ramses is the guy the fortune teller.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't remember the word. Yeah, I know who he is.
Yeah. And he says he's all over the press. He says that his report is going throughout the whole place, and people are listening to this. And in my friend's opinion, I think he's right. He says, people, although that's a fortune teller, it's nothing serious, but in certain areas of the population, people believe in those things, And if Ramses says that he's going to win, that Mesa is going to win in the first round, many people may just vote for Mesa because that's a winning vote, And I think that counterbalanced whatever went wrong with Mesa because of what he spoke. I think that this Ramses guy did have a good favor because, believe me, even in Santa Cruz, this Ramses guy has many fans because apparently, I haven't been following him, but apparently in last year, at the end of the year, before things happened, he already told people that there was going to be a woman president in Bolivia. And that happened.
No.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Apparently, he was right like 10 times in elections. Apparently, he was right in 10 times. Yes. Because of that, he has a lot of credibility, He's not just anybody speaking. He is being right like in a row 10 times. And the last time he was right he said the president of Bolivia was going to be a woman. And everybody laughed at that point. But after a month, we had Jeanine as president. So now people are listening to him. And if he says that Messi is going to win in the first round, that's the voice. And in La Paz, I hear that is very important because he's all over the media with his prognosis of what's going to happen in the election. So as I mentioned, I think that he lost points with what he said, Carlos Mesa, but I think he regained those points with Ramses' prognosis of the election. But very interesting. The politics is gyrating around Mesa, I think, a lot, much more than around the Mas, and that's interesting because just remember, just a few months ago, all the political news were around Evo Morales. Evo Morales
Yeah.
is still important, but I think Mesa is becoming much more important in the last 10 days at least. You know, I just see that every news is around him being a coward, or about him being a good president, or about him being whatever. But it's Carlos Mesa is the issue, and in politics, that's very important. The guy in the world that showed us was Trump. You know, the Trump says. Used to say always, you know, I don't care whether they speak good or bad about me. The point is that they speak about me. Yes, yes. And I think that's happening with Carlos Mesa a lot. You know, people are speaking about him. In La Paz, in Santa Cruz, they speak a lot of bad about him, but still they speak about him. And what I figured, where I started looking in the internet, and especially in Facebook, is that many people that were sustaining in Santa Cruz that they would never vote for Carlos Mesa and that they would vote for Camacho, that is appearing to be not as strong today. I think many people in Santa Cruz nowadays are saying, well, you know, there's resignation here. You know, Camacho is not going to be president because he doesn't have the numbers, although I don't trust in those polls. But there are too many polls that say that he's not very important in the national level. And Jeanine has lost a lot of her popularity. And people I think, are reaching the conclusion that in order to stop the mass, the vote must go to the winner, to the opposer winning, and that's Carlos Mesa. That's at least what I feel today. I don't know how that's going to come in the future, but it seems that things are building around him a lot more than they have a lot more than the last 3 months at least. You know, things are getting rosier for him now.
Well, I think in the case of Añez, at least, you know, there's just been a disenchantment with the whole pandemic and the corruption scandals and everything. You know, the longer her interim presidency continues, the more it works against her. I think, and I think the polls showed this too back in March, if I'm not mistaken, that it had elections been carried out when they're supposed to, you know, what month were they supposed to be? May? Initially?
May.
Yeah.
May.
She probably had a pretty fair chance. And the further we go along with this, she, you know, her administration is showing a certain ineptness and susceptibility to corruption that seems beyond their control. And so I don't think, you know, that's my take on that. With Camacho, outside of Santa Cruz, I just don't think you get the numbers. Although if you look at this the survey in Santa Cruz, he took first by a long shot. And Santa Cruz is important, but you don't win an election based on just Santa Cruz. Although not to be underestimated either. I guess we'll find out. Do you want to talk about the surveys, or the encuestas, the polls?
Oh, sure. Sure.
And where that's the one thing I didn't mention at the outset was that it's been a week or two. I want to say 2 weeks, but that doesn't seem like it's been that long.
No, it's
a week since last Sunday.
Yeah.
Right, because last week we didn't, last Saturday we didn't talk about it because they hadn't come out yet.
We didn't know. Yeah.
So we've seen, and I'll put these up. I took this from thanks to Unitel. We've got, here they are.
Oh, great, they have them there.
Yeah, here. This. I'm going to take this down. What's important to mention here is the number of undecideds, or the people who don't want to say. That percentage is somewhere around, it's above 20%.
Yep.
And that's no joke, because
no.
Add 20% to any of those, and you could, if those 20% or 25 or whatever it is went to just one candidate, or mostly to one candidate, then you've got a winner in the first round. If we're talking about either Mesa or Artist.
That's what Unitel did on Sunday, because I was wondering what Unitel does is they show the numbers that you just showed, and then they showed the voto, I don't know what they call that, but it's the final, the votes that are really going to count, which are, when you do the tally, you don't count the null votes or the undecided votes. Those just are not tallied.
Yeah.
They only are tallied, the valid votes are tallied. So what you get as a result when you tally only the valid votes is, according to this poll, to this polling enterprise, you get the MAS with 37%. And I was wondering how they do that, because how do you know? Like you say, how do you know? How do you distribute that 20% of the people that say they're undecided? And Unitel had a reasonable response, except that it's a response that it's very arbitrary too. You know, it depends how they apply what they say they do. What they did is what they say they did is that they asked people not only one question but many questions, and from this number of questions, they would reach a conclusion that although you're not saying for whom you're going to vote, they pretty much can tell for whom you're going to vote. For instance, you know, where do you live? I live in El Alto. I say, okay, that's your suspicious masista, right? This is, what do you do? I say, I'm a bus driver. Oh, that's highly suspicious masista. So if you have 2 or 3 elements that will drive you to the masismo, they'll count that as a masista vote. Again, if you do that with rigor, if you do that scientifically, I think that's very interesting. It could be true. If you don't, and if you're manipulating things, then yeah, you can get anything. But that's true for any question in a poll. So that's what this C.S. Mori said they did. They said that what they did is they asked a bunch of questions to people, and from that they gathered that yes, they're hiding their vote, but they can tell this is a masista vote or a vote for Añez or a vote for Mesa. And the conclusion was a very dangerous conclusion, because they reached the conclusion that the MAS at this point had 37% of the valid vote. That's why in the discussion, yeah, that's correct, if you're not a masista. But the conclusion, and I thought that was very interesting too, is that when they analyzed all these numbers, Carlos Valverde was the clearest of all the analyzers, I think. Carlos Valverde held that definitely the MAS could become government if they were in 37%, and that nobody else had anything to do except Carlos Mesa. The theory that Jeanine or Camacho or whatever would they do, according to Carlos Valverde, that's irrelevant. And he thought on Sunday that the only other person that could do something about his whole issue was Carlos Mesa, and that even though he would do something, he was still far away, because the distance was very big. When they did those numbers of the valid votes, the MAS was 37 and Carlos Mesa was way down this. I don't remember, it was 12 or 11 points underneath. So it looked very bad. And he said, if Carlos Mesa doesn't do things right, then he's going to lose in the first round. That was Carlos Valverde's conclusion. I don't agree totally with him, but if you compared him with the other guys that were on TV, he was the more coherent guy, because the rest of the guys, in my opinion, were not coherent. Yeah, they were very.
Sunday night, I can't watch TV.
Yeah, and I think most of the other guys were, well, there were only 2 other guys. There was a man, a journalist from La Paz, and he's just an anti-masista, and you cannot speak reasoning with somebody that's an anti-masista because they don't want to hear anything, you know. So he wasn't very logical in whatever he said. And there was a journalist that also works in La Paz, but is from Tarija, and she was masista before, during the 14 years. But I think that she was doing a good job analyzing, but was not as clear as Carlos Mesa. I think Carlos Mesa was absolutely clear, and that was his point. He said the valid votes show that the MAS has 37%, and that Carlos Mesa is behind him 11 or 12 points behind. So his conclusion was that Carlos Mesa had to do wonders in order to get to the second round. If he didn't do that, and the MAS did a good work during this 40 days, then the MAS could win the election in the first round. That was his conclusion. My take is that I don't think that's right, but see, I don't have no alternative numbers. If you do only numbers, which is not a good thing to do in politics, and you add the numbers, which is what I did on Monday, is I looked at the numbers and I looked what the percentage of Carlos Mesa was. Carlos Mesa had 17.1% of the vote. This is not the valid vote. This is the survey, including the undecided. So Carlos Mesa had 17.1%. And Añez had like 10 point something, and Camacho had 6 point something. If you add those two numbers, it gave you as a result 17.2. So if you add them together, they were above Carlos Mesa by 1/10.
Yeah.
But still, they were tied supposedly. You know, they were equal in terms of a survey, because there's a plus or minus random error there. So my feeling is that if they would do this, and that's what I wrote the article about. I said, if they would do this, the message to the people is a message of strength, especially to the people that believe that Carlos Mesa is so close to the MAS that it's a suspicious Masista vote, you know. And what the right would feel is that finally we have a true representative of our wishes, which is the uniting of Añez and Camacho. And my feeling was that if that would happen in Santa Cruz, they would really get a first place by far. If that would happen, my feeling was that Carlos Mesa would lose a lot of votes in Santa Cruz, because many of the people that are saying that will vote for Mesa in Santa Cruz are people that don't believe in Mesa. They just think that this is a voto útil. So they're not enamored by Mesa. All they think is that that's a way to stop the MAS. So my feeling was that if you did that, only with the vote in Santa Cruz, you would be above the 17.2%. Only with the vote in Santa Cruz, with the effect of that marriage in Santa Cruz, you would get above the 17.2. And my feeling is that if that would happen, that would also spread throughout the country, because in Bolivia, not everybody is leftist. You know, there are people from the right in La Paz. Banzer used to win in La Paz for decades, you know. In Cochabamba, there are people from the rightists, definitely. So I think that a lot of those guys would end up voting for the united front between Añez and Camacho. But that's not an easy task. My article was a criticism to them and to their, because both of those political expressions are born in the Comité Cívico, both of them. Camacho was president of the Comité Cívico, and Añez comes from Rubén Costa's party.
Yep.
And Rubén Costa was president.
Who also recently clearly expressed his support Añez, correct? Just this week. Okay. He was kind of quiet.
It was a wishy-washy support, but still, yeah. But see, them both were born in the Comité Cívico as political animals, you know. And what could the difference be if they both are raised and born and raised in the Comité Cívico? The Rubens people and the people from Camacho, there is no ideological difference there. The only difference there are personal differences.
You almost look at this as like the primary, the candidates that are going to go towards a primary in the states, you know, from the same party. It's kind of similar, right? But in this case, there is no or a party convention where they have to choose.
No. Even in the states, there's more difference than between these two people. You know, in the states, at least the Democrats say they want government and they want taxes in order to spend on people. The redistribution comes about through taxes. But between these two candidates, there's absolutely no difference. The only difference there is they hate each other, and period, you know. So later on the week, I talked to some people on the phone in order to see if this could ever become true. Mm-hmm. And I learned the following from people that are close to to Añez, to Rubén Costa.
Mhm.
I was informed that such meetings took place 2 months ago.
Okay.
An approximation between Añez and Camacho. The meetings were absolutely futile, were worthless. They sat there. This was what I was told. The person that told me is really from the higher echelons of our party, from Rubén Costas. And this person told me that they sat. He was highly critical. This guy was highly critical of Añez's team, because he said that the Añez's team showed a lot of soberbia. You know, they were. I don't know the word in English, but
Soberbia,
I forgot the word in.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's hard to translate because
they were.
Yeah, but
just
they were very
go ahead.
petulant. You know, they were very petulant.
Uh-huh.
So the point is that he said that Mr. Murillo and the other people that were representing, oh, she was there. She was in the meeting too. That they were just too conceited and too petulant and treated very, very bad to the Camacho people. And as a result of that, nothing happened, because both of those candidates said, you know, you go down, and the other one said, you go down, and nothing happened. The meeting ended. This meeting took place in Sucre. There was some event in Sucre, and they were both there. And it took place in Sucre. It was a secret meeting. Nothing happened. And this person that told me this story said, there is no chance that this could happen, because these are the facts. He said, this is what happened 2 months ago. I don't know. In politics, everything changes.
You never know, man.
And I hope it changes. Huh?
Go ahead. You hope it.
Yeah. My take is the following. See, I'm looking a little bit more into the future. If Carlos Mesa gets elected, he'll have a hell of a problem, because he'll face the mass in the streets and in Congress, because he's not a masista, definitely. You know, he may reach some agreements, but not an agreement to govern peacefully, because the mass is not going to risk on somebody that is not from his team. They're just going to give him hell in order for the mass to get to government again sometime in the future. And the other parties, which is basically Santa Cruz, are going to give him hell, because the people from Santa Cruz, the leaders from Santa Cruz, from Rubén Costas and from Camacho, cannot swallow Carlos Mesa, because they believe that Mesa is an anti-Cruceño and that he's against the Cambas, and this is going to be terrible. I think that he'll have a hell of a presidency, because he won't have a natural political ally. I think the only natural political ally for him is the mass, but again, the mass I don't think is going to risk for him, and he's going to be alone there, and I foresee a lot of difficulties for the next government. If Carlos Mesa becomes president, it's going to be a highly unstable process, which in the end could come to an early ending again, because in politics, it's not what the president wants. You have to be able to. That's why this is something we never speak about, because it's not necessary to speak about it. But this is why there are parliamentary governments in the world. Because it happens, you know, it happens in the middle of the road. The government loses the majority in Congress, or doesn't ever have a majority. That's in parliamentary governments. People get together in Congress, say, okay, you know, this cannot go anymore, and they take the prime minister out and they put another prime minister. If that cannot be done, they call elections again. That's why elections are not called after a number of years. You know, they can be called earlier, because the government loses his or her political base in parliament.
Right.
But in these presidential systems, it doesn't happen that way. You have to be 5 years in government, and if you don't have a majority in Congress, it's hard to walk.
Hard to get anything done.
The only way to walk, the only thing the thing you need is to have a majority in Congress. It's a very complicated issue. It's complicated because I see that in the States, for example, same thing happens, but I think it's less harsh, because It doesn't get as bad as it can get in Latin America, and especially in Bolivia. If you don't have a majority in Bolivia, you're out of the question. You're out of the game, because they will really do what the Masistas are doing right now to Añez. They approve laws that are against the government. They approve laws that would spend millions, trillions, billions of dollars just to screw the government, and that's terrible. That's just that's a conspiracy against the country, not against Añez.
Sure.
But they do those things, and I think that Carlos Mesa is going to have a very hard, tough presidency, because he's going to have the Masista front and the Cruceño front against him, and he's going to be the sandwich in a future government. That's why I was praying. I was praying that something could happen in Santa Cruz, and a new coalition could lead to a new political situation. I don't think that's possible anymore, from what I heard.
You'd like to see another alternative that's not Carlos Mesa and that's not Damas. I have my concerns.
A Cruceño government would be strong, I think.
Sure.
Because it would have a base in Santa Cruz.
Here's a question for you, and someday I guess we'll find out when Carlos Mesa writes his memoirs. But my interpretation of his role, starting when he pronounced his candidacy in 2019 against Evo, is that he kind of came out of hibernation. I mean, he's not a career politician, or I'm pretty sure I'm correct in that, and he decided to run, seeing the reality that there was no other candidate, and we just talked about this at the beginning of the show, that was that had any possibility of forcing Evo Morales to a runoff, and that's why he put his hat in the ring. I don't think he did it because he really wanted to be president. I just think he wanted Evo not to be president. Of course, that politically he can't say that, right? And so I was suspecting or expecting, after Evo was out, that possibly, and again, I don't have, the experience to make very good predictions, I guess. But, part of me wanted to think that Mesa wasn't going to run after Evo was out. And, but he did anyway, because if you look at his presidency in 2000, the year and a half or 2 years, whatever it was, between 2003 and 2005, it was a terrible experience. I don't think he enjoyed it. I don't think he felt good about it, or I read the book he wrote about it later, about what's it called, Presidencia Sitiada. And if you read that book, it makes you understand that if you take a message away from that, it was basically like, fuck this, I don't want to do this again. And I'm not going to, I don't want to get, and he disappeared from the political scene for more than 10 years, probably because that was true. And so what I'm getting at here is that why did he decide after Evo was out to continue as a candidate in these elections? It seems strange to me. And above all, knowing what kind of presidency he's facing if he wins, or anybody. What you just said, if there was an alliance between Añez and Camacho, they might have an easier go than Mesa would, but nobody's got it easy, not even the Mas, and so that's something I just can't understand. And I'd love to get inside his brain and see what's going on there. Or do you have a theory about it?
Oh no, I think that what you did is what journalists should do all the time, because journalists tend to speak about the obvious things in life. What are the numbers, what are the predictions, what are the wrongs, the rights, and that's it. But I think that what you're doing is fantastic, because it leads to a more in-depth analysis of the actors, right? Okay, I'll give you my theory about this.
Sure.
First, I know him because I've served with him in
Mhm.
1983, 84. I knew him before that because he'd been a journalist for many years
Yeah.
while I was in politics. And when I was a minister of communications, I dealt with him many times because he was a very prominent journalist.
Mhm.
In fact, one time he came to my office while I was in the ministry, and he said to me, because being in that ministry was hell. It's always hell, but it was truly hell when I was in government. And he came and said to me, you know, if I would be the minister of communications, I don't think what I would do different, you know, because what you're doing, he said, is what anybody else would do. And I think he was right. You know, he had a good appreciation of things. You know, he said, what else could you do? This is all you had to do, but still, it's not enough. You know. And that's why he looked at me and said, you know, I would never like to be in your place because that's just a very difficult situation. I said, okay, yeah, bye bye. But he is a contradictory man inside, I think, you know, in his very self, because then, you know, he became attracted to politics because it became easy for him, because as a journalist he didn't need to go through a ladder. He didn't have to start politics from the base, you know.
Mhm.
He didn't have to be a congressman, and then he didn't have to be a governor or a mayor. He
Yeah.
just directly was invited to be the vice president of Goni,
Mhm.
and that I think is attractive to anybody. You know, anybody that would be invited to be the candidate of vice president from a candidate that would really could become president. You know, that's a truism. You know, it would
Enticing.
happen. You know, it's not. Yeah, you're not going to be the candidate to the vice presidency of a party that's never going to be in power. Goni invites you. The possibility that you would be vice president was very high. In fact, he was a vice president, so
Mhm.
that's why he accepted. I think it's a vanity thing. I think at that point, you know, he knew that he wasn't a politician, and in fact, I don't know the conversations between him and Goni, but from what I understand, it wasn't easy for him to accept this. This is what I heard from third parties, that it wasn't easy because he wasn't really willing to go into this. Maybe because he knew that he wasn't made for this, you know.
Mhm.
And apparently, one of the arguments he held is that he owed a lot of money to banks and to financial institutions because he had organized his TV channel,
Fíjate.
and that's when the whole money issue became public, you know, because I think the Goni said, you know, don't worry about that, you know, we'll take care of that, you know, don't worry about that. And then I think that Mesa was also worried because after that he said, it's a point of no return, you know, I cannot go back to being a journalist because to him it was impossible, you know, once you're a politician, that's it, you know. So I think that he got into politics in that sort of situation.
Mhm.
Once he got into politics, it was a terrible thing because when he became vice president, um, I don't know how long it took for him to differentiate himself from Goni, but not too long. He was vice president with Goni, I think that in a happy marriage, like 2 or 3 months. And after that, he just got away. Why? Because politics is a tough issue, you know. Politics is anywhere in the world, you know. If you look at, every day I look at Trump because he's a fascinating guy, you know, but he lies all the time. He does all these tricks. And it's not just because he's evil, you know. Obama did the same things, except that he has a different way to handle himself, you know. But I always tell people, you know, what do you feel about a president watching on a on a TV screen that this guy is being killed with your approval? You know, he killed Osama bin Laden without a judgment, without a trial, without anything. You know, just on the basis of hearsay. You know, he's a terrorist, kill him. You know, and they did. Politics is that, you know, it's very crude, and you have to do things that are not legal, and you have to do things that are against your basic philosophical foundation, because that's pragmatism. Otherwise, you won't survive there. You have to do that, you know.
Well put.
And he couldn't do that. You know, he could handle that. And after 2 or 3 months, he was vice president. He just declared himself that he was not in agreement with the president, that for what this and this and this are the reason, you know. That's how he stayed in power until Goni resigned. And when he resigned, he was willing to. This was the difference between them both. Goni thought that, or believed, or was convinced that Carlos Mesa had to resign also, because they were a team. So if they are bullying you out of power, it's not just the president that has to go away. It's the whole team that has to go away. You know, that was Goni's view of this whole thing. But it wasn't Carlos Mesa. Carlos Mesa thought that, you know, the country had to be guided by laws, not by men, and that the law says that if the president is ousted or resigns, there has to be a vice president that takes his place. That was his position. That's what he did. And from that point on, it was just hell, because at that moment, I wasn't really in politics. After a week that he was in the presidency, I was called because they wanted me to go to the Palacio and be the link between the Palacio and the legislative. Because I knew the legislative. I've been many years in the legislative, and I knew how to work with them. And while I was in the Palacio with Carlos Mesa, it was just terrible, because Carlos Mesa had no appreciation for politicians whatsoever. From every 3 words he talked about politicians, all 3 of them were against them. You know, he thought that politicians were just unworthy people to be on the face of the world, not in Bolivia, on the world, you know. So it was very hard to work with him, because I was basically a political animal. My job was a politician's job, and I was serving to a man that didn't believe in politicians. So it's like, you know, he had a pig in order to go to the hen, you know, and to talk with the pigs there. So I didn't feel too good about that. And whatever was achieved in Congress, he was always very susceptible. He didn't want to deal with them at all. He just wanted me to do the thing, and him to be apart from all that dealing that was just dirty dealing. So it was very difficult. I had to resign after 3 or 4 months. I resigned because of that, because it was very hard to handle this. You can't have a president that dislikes what you do, you know, but he needs you to do the disliking thing. It was just a contradiction, you know. So I got away from government, and then I just looked from far away, what was happening. And it was every day was worse, because he didn't want to work with them, and these guys, well, they are the power, you know, they have power there. So they just made a life very difficult for him. He resigned, I don't know, 2 or 3 times, and then the first 2 it wasn't for true, because he was repentant and went back to the palace and back and forth, and that's how he got his fame of being a man of no word, a very coward, you know, in terms of the people's view. And it was a very bad experience. I haven't spoken to him. Well, I did speak to him one time after that experience. It was with my publishing of the book. He came to Santa Cruz, and he was in one of these occasions in which my book was presented to people, and he was there. He's a good guy, you know. He's not a bad guy in the personal sense. He's a good guy, but and we didn't speak about politics. But I also see that he has a big difference with the political issue in general, and I don't know. Good. Now I'm going to respond to your question. He was out of politics. That's true. He was absolutely out of politics. You know, the reason he went back is because, if you recall, he had, while president, he had done dealings with people that were exploiting lithium in the Salar de Uyuni. I think these are Chilean guys or Argentinian guys, enterprises. And he had approved some decrees whereby he permitted them to have this business running in Salar. and that was illegal. Those decrees were illegal, and the Mas found the decrees, and they said these are illegal, and they initiated against him
This was
processes.
okay, was it start with an X?
Right.
It's two-syllable word that ends in an X. I should
Borix?
something like that.
Borix?
Yes, that sounds right. Something like
So,
that.
so the Mas had him on the verge of initiating a legal process against him.
Hmm.
And he was absolutely scared of this. And I recall that
Quorax.
yeah,
Quorax.
yeah. So, and he was talking against the government. While he did this, he was talking against the government was attacking him. He was defending himself and attacking the government. And that was no business with the Mas, because if you start doing that, they'll really initiate a process and then jail you, or you flee. You had to flee Bolivia in those years. That's where things were heading. But somebody told Carlos Mesa, I guess, in the middle of this whole process, that the best way to defend himself was to get in politics and be a candidate, and he did that. And the result is that he was a good candidate. People supported him.
So it's just coincidence that at the same time he was also the spokesperson for the maritime case, because that seems to be what at least
propelled him.
Propelled him. Yes.
Yeah, but I don't think I'm not sure. See, I'm not in his mind, but I'm not sure he did that for being in order to be a candidate.
I don't think he did.
He's a very egocentric guy. And he became the main actor at that moment. Mm-hmm. And when he debated with this guy from Chile in Chile, he did a wonderful job.
Yeah, he tore him apart.
And the journalist from Chile, he did a wonderful job, definitely, And but I think he did that for Carlos Mesa's personal interests, and that's it, because he's an egocentric, he likes to be in the middle of the whole thing.
Okay.
And he was in the middle of it, and he probably had a calculation there, because he has a lawyer that's his right hand there, and he's a good lawyer. And this is something that I also upheld for a long time. I upheld, likewise they did, that the suit that Bolivia initiated under Mesa, under Morales, was a good suit. It was a good suit, and it was a legitimate suit. We'll speak about that some other time. That was lost not because of legal reasons. That's my take on that.
Mm-hmm.
Evo Morales did not lose that on legal grounds. That court, like any court in the world, is politicized, mm-hmm. and it responds to the instructions of very powerful people in the world. And my feeling is that exactly what happened, because Evo Morales was very, very unpleasant in those days with Trump, mm-hmm. face to face. He went to the United Nations and stuff like that. That's my feeling, and that's why I think we lost the suit of the sea in The Hague. But that's a whole different conversation. And that brings Mesa down too, because Mesa was supposed to be the hero there, and then with a sentence, both Mesa and Morales were
lost a lot of steam.
Pretty bad shape. Yeah, they lost a lot of steam. So that was the situation. But still, when he was facing this probable suit because of the Salar de Uyuni, he found, or somebody told him, in order to defend himself, get into politics and see what happens. And he tried the waters, and the waters were good. And then he received all this backing from the people, and that was the best way to defend himself from the Mas. Mm-hmm. And from that point on, it was a trip with no return, because he just did well, and he got a good result in the nullified elections last year. And after last year, he's still the next best guy in the polls ever since then. So I think he's against his will too. I think that's pretty true. I think he has a contradiction inside himself, because I don't think he likes that job. That job is a very difficult job. I don't know. Well, I do know why people like to be there, but those are very special kinds of people, and I don't think he's one of those. People would love to be in power at whatever cost, and that's not only Bolivia, that's anywhere in the world. Who would like to be the president of the U.S.? Come on, man. That has to be a hell of a job. That has to be a hell of a job, you know, because you will never please all these guys, and you will never please the Russians or the Europeans or the Arabs or the Israelis, because it's a mess. But see, there are people that like that, you know.
There's a special kind of person, man, and
yeah.
And I just I don't understand it. Maybe the I don't know. It'll remain a mystery to me. And like I said, maybe someday we'll find out.
It's not money, you know, because Trump had money before that, and he doesn't need money. He's there, you know. And Carlos Mesa, he can make money out of his profession. He always did, you know. He wasn't a millionaire, but he did a good living. And I think he doesn't need to get involved in politics in order to make a good living. But there he is, you know, and he has moments in which he likes this job and moments in which he doesn't. That's why he's so inconsistent too, you know, because I think he has days in which he says, you know, forget this, you know, I don't need to be here. But then there are days in which he says, you know, I'm making history, you know, and he's there making history, you know. Very bad for him, and I think very bad for the country. And then you see people like Jeanine, you know. To me, Jeanine is a fantastic person, worthwhile of being studied, you know, because yes, she has done poorly, you know, her regime, but her person is very interesting because look at her, you know. She has good character. She fights all the time. All these things are falling against him, and she is there. She's strong. She believes in what she does. I don't know. She has something that politicians need to have. And that's what Trump has, and that's what most politicians have. But that's not what Carlos Mesa has. That's a big difference. I think Jeanine, in those terms, is a better politician than him.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, she's got a a strong character. We could talk about. I don't want to get into it because the time right now, but. I also think of Tuto Quiroga, who's he's still going at it, but he doesn't have the numbers. But we can talk about that another time. But for some strange reason, he just can't pick up any votes. We'll talk about that later.
Too sad. Because he's a good. I think he's good. You know, he knows the country. He knows economics very well. I think he could be a good president, but they don't allow him. He gets 2% in the polls.
Why does that happen? Well, I mean, I don't want to go on too much longer, but what's up with that? I mean, people like him, right? I mean, at least the people, the no masistas don't seem to have a problem with him. Unless you ask them to vote for him. What's going on? Why?
That's interesting. It's hard to answer your question. I'll just guess, you know. I think that in general, in all countries, but in Bolivia especially, either you're part of the trend or you're not part of the trend. But then again, it's not a rule. I think he's not your typical Bolivian. I don't think he's a typical Bolivian. I think that as soon as you see and look at him, not only the color of his skin, his whole behavior, you know, he's a what they call in Spanish culito blanco, you know. that means a lot of things, you know. White ass, you know, white little ass, you know. It means a lot of things in this country. It means that you're not going to eat pork in the market because that culito blanco doesn't eat pork in the market. Culito blancos don't shake hands with people that are in the heat sweating, you know. Culitos blancos don't drink chicha in Cochabamba because yak, you know.
He ties his sweater around his neck by the sleeves.
He's a culito blanco, and I think that really differentiates himself from the rest of the people, you know. Whereas something from the extreme right, which I think is Ruben Costas or Jeanine, they do everything, you know. If you take Jeanine, I think that people perceive Jeanine as woman, average woman in this country, you know. I don't know, I know that you don't watch TikTok, but she's in TikTok now, cooking. She's cooking a chicken, you know. And man, she just looks like any housewife in Bolivia, middle, lower class. That's Jeanine Añez, you know. And see, that's not a culito blanco. They relate with her, you know, but they don't relate with this guy because they don't feel that he's part of us, you know. They feel like he's probably a remains of the Spaniard colonialism in Bolivia, you know. A guy that what they call criollo. I don't know. Well, you studied Latin America, you know. Criollos and mestizos, you know. Criollos were directly born from Spaniards, while mestizos were people that were born here from people that were born in Latin America. I think they see him as a criollo, and he's just not part of the whole issue. But then you ask me, you know, what about Goni? See, that's the contradiction. I don't understand, because Goni didn't even speak the language correctly. He didn't even speak the language correctly.
Yeah,
right?
he had an accent.
And he had lots of votes, you know, he had lots of votes. But somebody has to study this, and it's a very profound study. But without studying, my skin perception is that he doesn't ingrain in the Bolivian society as well as other politicians do. Mesa is just a Bolivian, right? I mean, yes, he's an intellectual. Yes, people don't relate to him. Many people don't relate to intellectuals because they think too much, and I think that's part of the problem with him. But in general, they consider him a typical Bolivian, you know, and that's no problem with him. But I think that Tuto has that against him. He's a culito blanco, and that's very bad. And you can be a Bolivian entrepreneur and be a culito blanco. You can be a very rich guy in Bolivia and be a culito blanco. Yeah, there are Bolivians that are very rich and a culitos blanco, and that's it, you know, the rich guy. But it's hard to be a politician in a culito blanco because that's contradictory, you know. You have to do campaigns with people that are not, well, millions of them are not culito blanco. So I think that's what I feel. I don't know if I'm right, but that's just a feeling. But the contradiction, what comes with Goni, right? Because Goni was a culito blanco, he was a millionaire, but still he had millions of votes, you know. He had something else, you know. He had a lot of charisma that probably counter-effected against his culito blanco self. It's an interesting. I love studying biographies. That's another thing of me, you know, that I like to understand why people become how they become what they become, and what their characteristics are, and that's a fantastic thing, I think, always to study. But it's hard to do it in Bolivia because not too many people write biographies, and if they write biographies, there are very few of them, and I don't think most of them are good. Some are, you know. I don't know if you ever read about Patiño. There are many biographies about Patiño, and he was a fascinating figure. But he was not a politician, you know. He was just a businessman, a very rich businessman, and that's it. Politicians need more qualifying requirements than a businessman, I think, because you have to be a good businessman because you have to administer the country, but you have to be a good social negotiator because you have to negotiate with all these people, and that's not a business issue. You need to negotiate peace in the country, and you have to quiet the far rights, the far leftists, everybody, you know. So that takes another personality. A pure business person could not do that because for a businessman, that's a waste of time, you know. And in politics, great part of the time you're spending talking to people in order for them not to burn the house. And literally, that's what happens, you know. Politicians speak hours to people in order for these people not to burn the house. That's it, you know. And that for a business person is just a waste of time. What am I doing here talking to these guys, you know? That's a complicated issue. But my feeling is that that's the problem with Tutu. Yeah.
All right.
Don't know, but that's my feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting case, and I keep asking myself, and I can't. I haven't been able to figure it out. So I appreciate.
How do people relate with Chi? That's a mystery, you know, because Chi is not a culito blanco. With Chi, yeah. He's not a culito blanco. He's not even a Bolivian, you know.
No, not by birth. Yeah. That's.
Yeah.
I think part of it he plays the religious card, with the evangelists, and And part of it, I think, is the novelty. You know?
Yeah, I think that's more important than the rest. Yeah.
And so that gets him the votes that he's gotten, right? And yeah, and I also have to wonder, you know, I have to wonder if, you know, with the election fraud last October, you know, people say that there's nobody asked this question, you know, people want to say that the results were manipulated, giving Evo more votes than he really had. Who's to say that they didn't manipulate the votes for Chi? I have a real hard time believing that almost 9% of the people voted for Chi. Real hard time. Real hard time.
Right.
And it wouldn't be crazy to think that within that fraud and intentional manipulation of the votes, that not only were votes given to Evo Morales that didn't really exist, but also to him, just so that they could kind of make it look a little bit more credible. You know, I don't.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, that's a different story as well. Well, I guess we'll find out next month, eh?
Yeah, definitely. But see, he's not even a Bolivian by birth, but he still has a lot of votes, and he has difficulty speaking Spanish. You've realized that, right?
I haven't listened to him a lot. He's a customer. He comes into Sahara. I orders pizzas from him all the time. I don't know if I told you that. He's a loyal customer to Sahara Pizza.
So you better speak good about him.
Yeah, I got nothing against the guy personally. Anyway.
Good.
All right. Well, hey, I guess we can end it there. Have a great weekend. We'll do the program next week in Spanish, and keep pushing on. Take care of yourself, everybody.
That's it. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, we'll see each other in 7 days from today.
All right. Bye-bye.
Enjoy your week. Bye-bye.